Talk to me about managing a multi-million-pound project whilst working a high-profile job.
I can say this in pure, total honesty. I underestimated big time.
When people often want to understand what it's like to be a developer, I think in people's heads, they think it means you're an interior designer and you get to design really nice homes. 90% of the time, I am a glorified secretary for everybody else. Are you there on this day? I've got to follow up with this person. How much did you purchase the property for?
847.
And what was your NGDV for that project?
1675.
Welcome back to another episode of the PBK podcast. Now, you already know the drill. Each and every week, we get a property professional to talk all things property. Now, today I've got Marcus from Point Guard Property. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. How are you, man?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, first and foremost, got to big up Marcus, as Marcus is a PBK member. So we always give them their, do you know what I mean, their standing ovation. Because as I always say on my Insta, PBK to the world. We firmly believe in this community that we've created. But today is really your day. I wanted to get you on because I think your journey is really interesting, and I think it's hopefully going to be inspirational to a lot of people that are listening. But let's hear a little bit about you. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself.
No, I appreciate it. And I'm quite honored to be on here. It's been a while. I've been watching the podcast. I appreciate the invite. I think for me, my journey, where can I begin? So I've started in property probably as far back as I was about 9-10 years old. Mm-hmm. My mother was always into property from a very young age. So once we come back from Nottingham, come back to London in kind of like the mid to late 80s, she was doing buy-to-let before it was even called buy-to-let. And just being around that from the get-go was always a thing of, you just pick things up as a kid. You just see it as normal. So back in those days, like if you're going to get the rent from a tenant, you're knocking on the door, and I'll be going with my mum, and it's like literally there'll be notes in a brown envelope.
You know what?
Thing. That's how I first started.
I've just had flashbacks to something I've not thought about. You go to the corner shop and get your rent book, where 100%. You'd have the slip, slip in the middle that you write on, and the copper, and you collect the rent.
100%. There'll be times where the tenants would come. So we lived in North London. The tenants were living in. She bought a flat in Tottenham Hale, which is like now it's it's a nice area to an extent. But back then, the tenants would come around to the house sometimes and be like, "Oh, Marcus, here's the rent for, this week or this month, etc., etc." So I kind of grew up in that environment.
Even weekly rents as well. Is it like a different
cash in hand weekly rent?
Yeah,
and that's going on the shopping, on the bills or whatever. And these times, mum was probably about 25, 26. So at that age,
I always think when you're at that age when mum's a landlord, but it's not really called buy-to-let like that. And did you see it as, oh my gosh, my mum's smashing it? Or was it just almost normalized because that's all you knew?
It's normalized. And that's the beauty, hindsight 2020, it's normalized. And that's the beauty of it, because I just always saw mum hustling. So she had a day job. She worked she was like what we call now an executive assistant. But she was working for the council, for the mayor, and was doing that. But the side hustle was, I'm going to buy this cheap flat in Tottenham, and I'm going to rent it out. Oh, actually, starting to make some money. I'm going to buy one in Tulse Hill. I'm going to rent it out. And you know what, son? You're coming with me. It was just, that's how it was. And then equally with my dad, he was very similar. He had his places in Hammersmith, in West London. That's where he grew up. So I kind of, without even realizing it, I had property mentors in a sense.
Property was normalized from you from an early age. And I think that's what's so amazing now about property becoming more prevalent within our community, that it's becoming more normalized because you're in a place where it's of privilege that you have that exposure to it.
Exactly.
And it's normal. Whereas I still meet people now, 2024, 2025, that are like, yeah, I don't really get it. I don't know anyone that owns a home. Yeah. So being in a position where you have that level of exposure means that you tell yourself, look, this is achievable. I can do this too. If my mom could have done this as an EA, and we're going to get onto your career path. Yeah. But if you're doing X, Y, and Z now, it's like, well, I must do the same as a bare minimum.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think in the community, particularly in the Caribbean community, that you think about Windrush generation, etc., when they come over, if I think like my grandparents' age, it was quite standard to buy a house, and if it's a case of you're renting out all the rooms, HMO, but it wouldn't have been called that then, but it effectively was the same thing. All of that was happening in West London, in South London, etc. And then fast forward to kind of my generation and maybe a few generations after that, there's maybe, not sure why, but there's maybe been a bit of a disconnect between that, you know, the achievable thing of being able to own your own property. Like the Caribbean parents or grandparents will typically sell up, you know, and go back home, as it were. And then it kind of, there's a little bit of a change in terms of people's perception of what they can achieve and what they're used to seeing.
And I think obviously with property prices going up, with wages not matching the level of increase, there came a disconnect between affordability.
Yeah.
But I think the awareness, I think, is really important. Yeah. And the financial literacy to be like, you know what, you don't have to sell this home to, you know, to go back to the Caribbean. You can do that, and you can leverage and maybe add on a child, or, you know, a spouse or a sibling to the mortgage, and they can still manage the asset, and you can retain the asset whilst leveraging that to go and buy something, whether it be in another part of the UK or back in the Caribbean.
So how you've just so eloquently put it, you're absolutely right. And going back to your point about being fortunate enough to be, I was fortunate enough to be in that environment where not just my mum, my dad's aunties, like immediate family, they already had that mindset. So, you know, uncles would say to me, whenever you do get a property, if you don't need to sell it, don't sell it. Hold on to it for as long as you can so you can pass it on. And you just, that's just the norm that I grew up in. So,
but I love that extension of the immediate family has become like, I've now got my online family, like my like, so it started off with my Instagram family, now the YouTube family, now it's like the PBK community. But that idea of teaching best practice, because you spoke about something, and I think it really resonated with me when you said like, it wasn't really cool by to let your mum was just hustling. She just saw, here's an opportunity, here's some way to make money. I can see the demand for accommodation. I can see that I can supply it. And that's really, property is not different from any other business. But because of the barriers to entry, because everything costs tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, mistakes are super expensive, and it scares people off. But one thing about having a community, a hub, like a hive of people that know what they're doing, means that you can have that collective minds where, oh, by the way, don't do that. That one's going to mess you up, but do it like this. And that's what I love about being able to have these conversations, whether it be in the community or just on the podcast where people can listen in.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because I think it kind of, you know, within the community, without outside of the community, it's the same. Like people generally are going through very similar things and experiences when it comes to property and trying to get on the ladder, etc. So, yeah, look, like I said, I was really fortunate. You know, fast forward a few more years, you know, was doing well at school, wanted to be a pilot.
I feel like I've had a few people say they wanted to be a pilot. It always looked a bit confusing to me.
Confusing?
But, like, have you been in a cockpit? There is a lot of buttons.
There is a lot of buttons, it's true, but...
And I feel like, see, did you ever look into being a pilot?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Can I just use the steering wheel? Like, I feel like a lot of those buttons are just like... I don't know, like calling the cabin crew and stuff like that. Like, I'm just trying to...
Yeah, there's a bit of that, but no, there's a skill level with it as well. So I used to be like in the cadets, blah, 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 like doing gliding training and whatnot, and wanting to be in the RAF. But maybe, thank God, that didn't happen when I wanted to do it. There was a couple of
giving me a lot of flashbacks today, you know. You know, I almost joined like the territorial army while I was at uni.
I even looked into that because I didn't. Because I like the discipline and the kind of like.
For me, it wasn't even that. Like sometimes, I'm probably like a salesperson's dream. I'm quite naive. So like, they came into the uni and were like, yeah, you get to fly a plane and go like, I don't know, like, flipping. Like, yeah, you get to go like skydiving, and we're going to pay you a bit of money and you don't even have to go to war. I was like, all right. I think I went down for the first day and I was like, they were talking about, minimum subscription of 4 years. I was like, oh yeah, I got to the toilet, and I just left and never came back.
You never went back at all? Okay, wow.
That was mad.
I went back for the test and stuff, but it didn't happen. But even so, it was kind of like, okay, what do I do that's going to make me... I was like wedded on that idea of being a pilot. So it was still like, what can I do that's going to pay me enough money where I can pay for my private pilot lessons.
Because it's expensive, right?
It's always been
in the
expensive.
6 figures.
Yeah.
Like from
now it's 6
conception.
figures. Back then it was a little bit less than.
Okay.
But the first stage of getting your pilot's license, blah, 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 was about like 5-6K. So I'm like, okay, I need to do a job. What job's going to pay me money? Finance. So
what did you study? What was
So I study. So I went to uni for a few years. I went to Brunel.
For a few years?
Yeah.
How many's a few?
So I was at uni for probably like 3 years. I took a gap year, loved working, and realized that I'm about doing it, not necessarily like sitting there.
You know we're quite kindred spirits. You know, I went to Brunel.
Yeah, really?
I dropped out.
Same. No, same. It wasn't for me. It just wasn't for me. And I was doing, your parents are like, you got to get your degree. You've got to, but the self-belief, not trying to sound arrogant, but there's always been this thing inside of me that's like, I know what I want to do. Well, I've got a clear idea of what I want to do, and I think I can do whatever I want to do. Like it's not, if I don't have a degree, that doesn't mean I can't be what I want to be. And I've always believed that. I've always felt that. And so when it came to the most difficult part of that was having a conversation with my parents saying, I'm bun this, I'm done. And that didn't go down well. Yeah. But equally, I was convinced I knew what I wanted to do, which was actually I want to be a pilot and I need to work now. Having a taste of the job that I was doing, I was working for HSBC and like an internship. So it was maybe like 8 weeks long. And my thing was like, okay, you know what? I need to stretch this for longer than 8 weeks. So I would go around to all the different department managers and hey, I'm Marcus, blah, 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 because I've always been chatty and personable with people. And they kind of was like, who's this little dude like coming up to my desk? And I'd be interested, like, what are you doing? How do you do it, etc. So I extended that 8-week thing from like, I was working in like a marketing part of HSBC. I went to IT, I went to corporate banking, and I just stretched it out for almost like 18 months. And I was like,
basically, you created your own like gap year internship style program.
It was only meant to
networking.
be 8 weeks, and it was just networking. So again, early on, I kind of realized, okay, I want to be a pilot. I'm really focused on this, and I can work and make this happen. But I equally understood, the power of personality. I didn't use those words at that time, but it was just as simple as I know how to talk to people. I like talking to people, and I'm getting a good response from them as well. So that's going to help me if I haven't got my degree. So I was even more convinced I can do this. It was an easy conversation well, not easy. It was difficult with mum in particular, but hey, you know what I mean? Yeah. It had to be done.
So then you did the 18 months there.
Yeah.
Where did you go after then?
So after that, I was going back into retail, bro. It was like Sainsbury's delicatessen with the apron and the hat.
Yeah. How did that feel?
For me personally, the way I view things and life in general, the moment I lock onto this is what I want to do, I don't care what I have to do. If it means like the Sainsbury's thing, bothered. And money's there that needed to be made. I wanted to go raving and do all the kind of things you do want to do at that age, but equally it's a stepping stone. So I did that for maybe it was probably maybe a couple of years. I was doing the retail thing, but I was constantly applying for roles in banking because I'd had that experience.
And I think, look, like for somebody who's watching this, like, and we get people, particularly like why I want to speak to you is obviously someone who's gone through the 9 to 5 and creating a professional career alongside property.
Yeah.
But I think you've touched on a lot of things there, which is as a starting point, like if they always say like, oh, it's not who you like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And sometimes like you can get yourself in a door, which is great. But then how you then choose to navigate once you're in that room will decide whether you stay there. And that was the difference between 8 weeks, which is just kind of a blip on a CV versus 18-month experience. So I would say for somebody that's listening who's trying to further their career, use what you're good at. 100%. If you're great with people, connect with people. Like if you've got other skill sets, if you've got a great attention to detail, let people see that, and use what you have at your disposal. I think more often, also another great takeaway is that like what is deemed as a step backwards it's still a step. It's just in a direction. It's what keeps you moving, and stepping in perpetual motion is what's going to get you to your next goal. And you see, whether you say going from working at HSBC in like quite a corporate space to going to work in retail in somewhere where you may not want to be at that age based on what your peers are doing. But we see great examples. I think one of the best examples that I ever remember is Bashi.
Yeah, he's the bus driver, isn't it?
Exactly
and
that. Like he was
what he's done.
Like Chubba Chub mixtapes, shout out Bashi, one of my favorite mixtapes of all time. Was amazing. Bashi, like everybody in like the UK music scene knew who Bashi was.
Yep. 100%.
Like great stuff on some great songs and had like great bodies of work. But when the music didn't work out, he didn't say, "Oh, I can't do anything." Put his hood up, got back to work, and went to go and drive buses. Now, Bashi, that same person that years later is still putting out music, is excelling in acting fields, and it just goes to show that sometimes you've got to do the hard graft and the difficult work and the dirty jobs to tick the boxes to reach your long-term goals.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And it's like you say, Bashi's a great example, and there's probably lots more examples that we, that are out there that, that we might not be as famous, but it's that graft is really, it is so important. And having, I think, the tenacity to keep going, because life is a thing of, there's going to be knocks and not everything is going to land the way you, even when you have a vision of where you want to get to, it's not all going to be a straight path to that. There's winding, turning, and there's sidestepping and coming back and then going forward. That's part of the whole journey that,
no, for sure,
gets you to that successful point.
So then what did you end up going into in the long term?
In terms of my
career-wise?
So, yeah, good question. So I kind of, like I was saying, I was applying all the time for these banking roles. And then it was, I saw this advert, or not advert, a recruitment consultant calls me and was like, "Oh, there's this company, they deal with hedge funds." And I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, what's a hedge fund? But he was like, have you come across it? I was like, yeah, I know hedge fund, yeah. You got to kind of fake it till you make it till you make it to a little extent. So I went for the interviews, and funnily enough, the guy that I've been really fortunate with, the managers that I'd worked with previously, and the guy that interviewed me that had to make the decision was from Croydon. Thornton Heath. And it turns out like his best friend was Jamaican. His sister was, do you know what I mean? So he
played on a personable relationship.
So he'd grown up in a in a community whereby like ultimately when I got there in the interview, it was like, okay, this guy, I can see there's something here. So anyway, went through a few more stages of the interviews and I got the job. And I didn't know what an equity was, all these different kind of asset classes, had no idea. But again, confidence, I could work it out. As long as you teach me, that's what I kept saying to him. As long as you show me, I'll get it. And I'll work it out. And that's what happened. So I joined the firm. It's called Global Financial Services. And the company, when I joined at just the right time. It was small, intimate, some amazing people that had some amazing experiences in hedge funds previously. And I was just like a sponge, just like doing the same thing I did at HSBC. Like, what are you doing? How can I help? I want to get involved in it, blah, 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 blah. And within about 6 months, I'm like, we want you to be a team leader. So I was there for maybe 4 years, and it just kind of skyrocketed me to the kind of hedge fund world and really getting involved in that.
Nice. And then when did you start to invest in property yourself?
So actually, it was there was that same flat I was talking to you about in Tottenham. When I left uni or dropped out, and I kept banging on with my mum about I want to do this pilot thing, she was like, "Okay, I'm gonna help you do this. How much money do you need?" I told her the flat in Tottenham. Basically, she was like, "Here you go. You sell it for me. And if you make a profit, you get to keep it." I was like, "Can we go?" Seriously, Mum? Like, yeah. If you make a profit on it, and so basically, I found the estate agents down in Tottenham, was going back and forth with them, and I think Mum bought the place for maybe about 38k back in the day, and sold it for 55 or 56k. So I got 6K out of that. Fast forward, I didn't get to do the pilot thing. Kind of had to move out of home. And the day job, joining the hedge fund, it all kind of aligned at the same time. Now, I knew people that were renting rooms for 600-700 quid in Clapham. And I was like, I don't want to be paying rent £600-700 when I could probably live somewhere for that, roughly that same amount. I have the whole place to myself. Started looking for a property, basically. And that 6K became my deposit.
And I think that's what's interesting is that it's the exposure to information, because some of those same people, it doesn't matter what they might have been doing, but they might have actually had a little bit of money behind them, whether it's, they played football for a couple of years. They bought, like we've had people that buy and sell watches. We all, there's stuff like you buy and sell sweets in school, and some people make a lot of money just doing odd jobs. And but it's the exposure to know that, is that rent a good use of my money, or can my money be better employed? And you don't know what you don't know.
True, very true. And the thing about it as well is, like, in the day job, most of the guys and women that were in the working with me, they were, maybe some of them were coming from outside of London, etc. So they'll come to London, it's finance, it's all exciting, etc. So it's natural to kind of almost do the student digs type thing. Like, that's what you do, especially if you're not from the ends or the area. So, but for me, like you say, the exposure experience of, well, we've had tenants and been renting and blah, blah, blah. And actually that, if you're fortunate to have that exposure, then you realize that actually that's not necessarily the best use of my money. The compromise was, I'm going to have to find something that's cheap enough that might not be in a sexy area. And are you cool with that? Yeah, because nobody don't know me in Stratford. I'm fine.
So that was Stratford. That's where you first went. How much was the first property you bought?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I bought it for about, it was a new build actually. I think I bought it for something like 85K or something like that. 80, yeah.
And that's why people always say the best time to buy property was yesterday. And if not yesterday, it's today. And because prices only go one way.
Prices only go one way. And I even remember because my parents were like, look, buy something close to what at the time I was kind of in Wood Green.
I always, guys, they'll probably look at you and think you've mad overpaid for the property.
The whole family, they're like,
cussing you.
They come to my granny's house. Oh, we need to speak to you, Marcus. This year you can't be getting in this type of debt and because for them it's like you always pay off your debts, you always pay off your mortgage and 80,000. Oh, they bought houses for 20K back in 1932, whatever. So it was like, it was a big deal, but I was adamant, like, it's a new build, it's 2 beds. If it's near the tube station, near we're kind of in between Stratford and West Ham. And my thing was like, look, if I have to rent out a bedroom, Mum, I'll do it. But like, at the moment, this is affordable. And I don't care that it's a rough area right now. I need to get to work. And that was just the main thing for me. It was, early 20s. So that was the first foray into owning my own.
And then when did you first invest into a buy-to-let property or become a landlord yourself?
So that happened close to just a little bit before the financial crisis, actually.
Pre-2007.
Yeah, well, actually 2007. It was end of 2006, 2007. Yeah. So I was like sort of getting a bit fed up of being in East and wanted to move. I thought, okay, I want to keep my property. Because I always remember what my uncle said, if you can do it with keeping it, then do that. And then and so I kind of was like, all right, let me find something in West London. But was following like similar principles of location, the ability to it's mad when we're talking about this, the things that we're thinking about back then has always been the same. Like location, is the opportunity to extend it if I want, can I get a garden if it's a flat and it's top floor, and all of these different things. And I managed to find something. At the time, I think that was probably, because the credit crunch was coming up, I probably overpaid for the flat, but I didn't care. It was like, I want to move to West London and it, it satisfies
the boxes of what you needed.
Ticks the boxes of what I wanted. And then, boom, the credit crunch was just like negative equity.
And that's because I think for a lot of people, if you were like, when you bought your first place, it's like, okay, I was told not to, but it worked out and it ended up being good. But in your second place, you've gone and you've kind of taken a dive and 6 months later, the market's in the bin.
Bro, I'm telling you, the stress on my shoulders at that time, I was just like, and the mortgage payments were bonkers.
Yeah.
And then the job situation wasn't secure because people were just getting like laid off left, right, and center in my game. So
and that's I think people don't know, and I'm not necessarily like I wasn't active that much in the market, or wasn't actively active myself in the market, was aware. But when people talk about the market now, and they're like, there's a lot of people that will be like, oh, it's so hard now. Like, you know, it's too difficult. When people talk like, I have people saying, oh, I want to get into property, but my friend said this, and my cousin said this, and like the hamsters is saying this. Like, there's always going to be a reason why you shouldn't. But like when you hark back to like that time of like post financial crisis, like ask people were literally just posting their keys through the letterbox of banks saying, can't look after this, like take it back, basically, and just assuming that meant that, listen, I'm done with the property. People were dealing with like, you know, double digit interest rates.
Yeah.
So I say that to say, if you're currently struggling to get into property, there's always going to be a reason why you shouldn't do it. But that it's not your job to look at that. It's your job to look at the reasons why you should and focus on making the market work for you.
Yeah, fair point. I think the thing with property as well is from an early age, I kind of recognize that it's a long-term thing. And so as much as there was never it was always a case of thinking, okay, well, how am I going to work this problem out? And fundamentally, it was just really about how am I going to maintain keeping a job? Because I knew no matter what, whether it meant renting out a room or something, there's going to be some way that I can make these mortgage payments. I am not giving up on this thing.
And that's the thing, like people often look at property like it's a completely different business to any other animal. But like sayings, like popular sayings are popular for a reason, because they make sense and they hold true and they hold the test of time. So when they say, for example, cash flow is king and cash flow is the lifeblood of a business, it's the same for property. If you can ride out the cash flow element, so your interest rate's gone up, well, what can you do? Can I rent out a room? Am I going to have to, you know, put it like, for now, we look at stuff on short lets, we look at serviced accommodation, we look at like assisted living, all these different things. How can you make your business sustainable? Because if you can ride it out when everybody else is failing, when the dust settles, you're going to be in a position way above everybody else who wasn't able to ride the storm.
No, 100%. Where I moved to in West London, one of my neighbours was he was in a bit more of a fortunate position. So I'd probably bought my flat for about 300k at the time. Excuse me. But then the crunch happened, and there were like 3-bedroom houses around the area that some of them had dropped down, like their value was not much more than what I'd paid for my flat. So you could imagine, I'm like, I could have got, if I'd have waited a little bit longer, I could have a whole 4-bedroom house. And one of my neighbours actually bought one of those houses that essentially was kind of repossession,
like
in a
distressed
asset. And it's worth 1.2 mil now.
Yeah. So it's just, again,
you know what I mean? And it's exactly what you're saying.
It's time. Like, obviously that's kind of timing and being in a position to operate, but
yeah.
You're only going to put yourself in a position if you're here for the long term.
Exactly.
So obviously that's it. So you've had maybe not the best experience in the short term, but your life experience said that that's just business.
Exactly.
You have ups and downs, and we go again. In terms of being more active as a property investor, when did that start for you?
It actually started, so a bit of the side hustle kind of off the back of that was, I then was looking after Caribbean like expats that were going back to Jamaica, St. Vincent or whatever, and for 6 months or whatnot, and they still had portfolios in London. So they may have 2 or 3 properties and tenants, and I would actually look after them. So I had I'd made a connection with a builder, Bulgarian guy. Me and Ersin got on really well. And so my kind of side hustle whilst going through that period was because I needed money. That's the bottom line.
We're gonna have to check, that we're not. So we were just separated at some point, because our journeys in terms of like obviously different. Yours was Caribbean, but mine was the Nigerian landlords with my builder Thomas, rather than very similar experience.
So we was like, it would be a bathroom needs to be refitted. I'd be like, okay, this is how much I'll charge you, and I've got a guy that and so I could do it, and I was doing that, and then it would be, could you manage the tenants sometimes, and all of that. So I was doing that, and obviously it was an extension of I think when I let out my Stratford flat, that was a company let. It was actually a church that I managed to they were connected with, that was in the local area, and I was like, look, I'm moving out, and it was like a 2-year lease. So I was kind of had time to kind of do this other thing because I wasn't having to focus so much on Stratford, and that kind of built up. And then I was getting Urson quite a few other jobs and stuff, and he'd give me a cut of that over time. So I started to get quite active. The day job was getting busier and busier. But then once we decided, I think probably about 2014, 15 is when we added a couple more flats and was like, okay, self-managing, but this could be not necessarily, it was more like something for pension at the time, because I was still very much focused on hedge fund, I could, this is going to be the thing for me. Fast forward again, probably around 2018, 19, kind of get to that point. I was getting to that point where it's like, I actually enjoy this.
Yeah.
The amount of people that you meet, not all good, but some good, etc. And I was like, I'm actually enjoying this. What could I do that isn't necessarily their day job and I could transition out of? So I really started to put a plan together of how I could be a developer and then build a bigger portfolio. It's probably around sort of 2018, 2019. And then I sort of hit the execute button in 2020 January, and then we know what happened in 2020. So it was a bit of a challenge, but
interesting. It was, and that's the thing, like when they talk about like predicting the market and looking at things, like if everybody saw 2020, we would have thought market going off a cliff, went in completely the other direction. And a lot of house prices increased quite drastically because of stamp duty holidays, just because of supply side stuff that meant there wasn't new stock coming to markets that went quite well. So that project 2020, that was your Brixton project?
No. I started looking into like, okay, how do I become a developer? Like you've managed extension, like you've done your own extensions and loft conversions on your own house. You've done it for clients as well, effectively. So you're pretty well versed, and you got a build team that you can rely on as well. So how do you make this happen? What's the next step? So I was like, I need to be around, people that may have done something before. So I kind of got a mentor. Shout out to Sunny Mahal from back in the day, and he kind of helped guide me around how I need to approach it. I did some courses. I was attending like PIN networking events just to understand what's going on in this property world, because I've been very quite siloed, just doing my own thing. And so off the back of that, I would say sort of around towards the end of 2021 was when, the Brixton project kind of came to fruition, completed, etc. And then like the drama began, so to speak, but it took a while.
But I think like some things you said in terms of like understanding that you were already achieving. It would have been very easy for you to say, I've got flats, I've got a great job, I've got a good side hustle, I've got investments. In my circle, you'd probably find amongst a lot of your friends, you're the guy. They'd be like, oh, Marcus is killing it. Marcus is doing that. And I think a lot of people get sucked into that. I'm the big fish in a small pond. I'm getting a lot of accolades. I can rest on my laurels. I've got too confident. But I think it's really important, like you said, to go out there and be like, you know what? I know there's more out there in this world. So whether or not I know it's for me or not, I'm not going to know until I go to PIN, I go to Prosperity, I go here, I get a mentor, I actually get to the point where I know what I know. Let me go and find out some of the stuff I don't know and work out what I like, what I don't like, and where I think I'm going to need some additional assistance to aid me on my journey. So your Brixton one, I think, is a really interesting project because it's at quite scale. And I think one of the reasons why I think it's important is you were able to deliver that without going full-time in property, without being there all the time. You delivered how much did you purchase the property for? Now imagine this. You've just completed on a fantastic property. The renovation plans are buzzing in your head, but then the reality hits. Endless paperwork, slow bank transfers, and confusing accounting. That's where Tide changes the game. It's more than just a bank account, it's your all-in-one business toolkit. You can incorporate your company with ease, send invoices and get paid instantly, and track expenses effortlessly, further allowing you to save for your next big project with competitive interest rates. Tide takes the stress out of managing your finances so you can focus on what you do best, building a successful property portfolio. Which is why you should download the Tide app today and open a free business current account with the link in my description. Use the discount code PROPERTYBYKAZY50 and you'll receive £50 cashback when you spend £100 on your new Tide card. That's PROPERTYBYKAZY50 and you'll receive £50 cashback when you spend £100 on your new Tide card. Now back to the video.
So it was, at the time it was 847.
847. And you bought it with planning or?
No, so I took it through planning.
You took it through, so you bought it non-conditional.
Yeah.
What was what did you buy it as a house?
Yeah, it was a house already split into 2 flats.
It's a house split into 2 flats.
Yeah.
So
on one freehold.
On one freehold title.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you converted it into
added another flat, but then made it like split titles and
exactly that. And what was your NGDV for that project?
NGDV is 1675.
16, so close to doubling the value. So it's obviously a lot of value, and a lot of that's through the planning gain of adding the extra unit.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what that's like managing effectively a multi-million-pound project whilst working a high-profile job.
I can say this in pure, like, total honesty. I underestimated big time just how much it was going to take out of me. And maybe sometimes that naivety is needed, because maybe I wouldn't have done something so big so quickly.
It's a secret blessing.
Yeah, it's a secret blessing.
If you knew all the problems, would you have even been able to achieve it?
Knowing me, if I knew all the problems, I'd be like, okay, I know these now. Like, how do we still go for it? But yeah, in all honesty, it was a super big challenge. And I kind of, even now, I have to keep reminding myself that you were effectively doing 3 flats, 3 separate flats, doing a build for each one of them, and then selling all 3 all at the same time. That's a lot for your first development project, like, by any means. So in short, it was a super big challenge. And at the time of the day job, I was getting to, like, I've been really fortunate with my day job, worked with great people and was getting really senior. So like, for example, my title would be like head of operations, which is running with HR, all the different things outside of actual trading. You've got a team reporting into you. You've got to lead that team. There's strategic planning that you have to implement. But equally, a lot of the skill sets in that, like, you're playing a point guard position. Everything's coming through you, and you're kind of massaging how things need to be done and making sure people are doing what they should be doing. So being able to, I wasn't necessarily going into the office every day, and that really helped me being able to be on site, manage the build team. And I basically had a contractor who was subcontracting, but really having the back and forth dialogue with him, the planners. Actually, AA Draft did the drawings as well for me, which was fantastic as well. And really, it was like every week, nearly every minute of every day, it was Brixton. But every weekend I was on site. Yeah, every weekend. And sometimes, you know, there'll be lunchtimes I'd go on site to see what was going on. It was tough. It was really tough.
When we look at community members like yourself, Afs, like Tash, like loads of people that have done deals and they've really excelled, one of the common denominators I find is, particularly when you're starting out, when I say like you have to get messy, I'm not saying you should go and do any of the works. I'm not saying in that regard you should get stuck in. Yeah. But you need to be asking why so often that it's like that's your favorite letter of the alphabet, because 100%. You need to understand things. Because also there's so many different moving parts where not everybody else's priorities are your priorities. Yeah. The priority of the plasterer is, look, I just want to get this property plastered. It's not their priority to know if there's one of the walls is not dry properly and there's some damp behind one of the walls, or the electrician hasn't finished. So you've got to be there to be like, why are you doing that? What's happening? Because ultimately the buck stops with you. If they mess up, realistically, yeah, you can try and charge them back and be like,
they're off to the next job.
They're on to exactly
They're
that.
off to
So,
the next job.
and I think the other thing that you said is really important is the transferable skill sets. When people often want to understand what it's like to be a developer, I think in people's heads, they think it means you're an interior designer and you get to design really nice homes.
And that's a little part of it, but it's not.
It's a finite and it's a fun part, but that's not what, like when people say, oh, what's it like? I say 90% of the time, like I am a glorified secretary for everybody else. Are you there on this day? I've got to follow up with this person. Are you there? And so having a skill set where that's you are bringing a team together in your own role. A lot of people don't realize how qualified you are. Already.
Exactly.
But you just need to pull the right people together. And that's why like being in a community like this, like when you can say, I can lean on AA Drafting, who I know are also developers. So they know what we need from a developer standpoint, front and back end. And having those people around you.
I think you're absolutely right. I think if in now being part of this group, I wish, I had when I was starting
on conception.
From conception, having this kind of community is exactly, if you want to be a developer, this is exactly what you need, because the key to what I found, because there were problems and I had to get rid of the build team in the end and find a new one.
Sometimes you don't know that I should fire faster.
And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. Like the key risk was the builders or the build contractors, and they're always running generally on thin margins, but their ability to deliver on cost and on time is everything. And that was a challenge. And so being able to have a community like this, like when I do another one, it's a completely different
because that I know all the legal issue, I've got my solicitor, I need finance, I've got my broker. You have all the key points and you're just bringing their expertise together, rather than every time there's an issue being like, I've got to get back on YouTube and I've got to see if I can become a lawyer in 27 minutes because I've got a meeting soon.
You just like, now I understand that loads of things went wrong, loads of things went right. Look, at the end of the day, I took a massive risk. Certain family members backed me with a lot of money as well, and I put in all my own money because I just wanted it to be, I didn't want to have, if anything did go wrong, I didn't want to have to be owing investors, as it were. But I still managed to kind of build something, create something, went through the ups and downs, which was a lot, and then we managed to sell them.
I've seen the project firsthand. Like it's an amazing project. It's a testament to obviously the work you put in.
I appreciate
also the experience over time, which it takes a while to build up the experience and the confidence. And it doesn't mean just because somebody does it, somebody else has to do it exactly the same time. But it's a really good project, and I think it's given you the confidence to then go on and say, I learned this, I'm going to do this slightly different, but this went really well. And I'm going to rinse and repeat.
100%. And rinse and repeat is the thing. And we've been fortunate enough to kind of hold on to one of the properties as well. So it's like, when I'm speaking to people about what I've done, it's like, well, do you want to come and see it? And that just, the difference in conversations, even with estate agents, like when you're trying to, show them that you're serious, and you might not necessarily have the money to buy something, but when you can show them something physically, it just immediately transforms the conversation, and they're like, oh, okay, you are about it. Okay, let's have further conversations.
It's just leverage. I always talk about like when we talk about property, why we like it over other asset classes is because you can buy something for £1 million with £100,000 cash. You can leverage, but also like whether it's you can leverage. Oh, by the way, I work in an investment firm and I'm surrounded by people that are worth in the tens of millions. So this is my contact base. Whether it be I'm in the PBK community and I'm around 100 developers. So I've got hundreds of years of experience collectively. You have to use what you have at your disposal. What's kind of like, what does your next deal look like for you if you could kind of envisage it?
For the next deals for me, I envisage it being flips, in all honesty. I want to spend, so it's two things. Flips are going to be the real focus for 2025 because I want to get a quote unquote pipeline. So like the 1 to 2 bed conversions or 2 to 3, because I think that's going to be a bit more of a liquid way to a quicker way of generating a pot of cash.
And it's good because you did retain an asset.
Yeah.
It's good to recoup the equity that you've got and have it as working capital.
Exactly.
Which, as I always say, like when we kind of joke and argue with, like, pick up my guy Alfred, like we argue about strategy and stuff.
Right. But
I think like, from a technical standpoint, in an ideal world, you do a bit of both.
100%. I think I genuinely believe that. I think it's a bit of both. So again, using some of the analogies from the hedge fund and like investment world, like you'll have strategic trading, which is long-term holding an asset and playing and gaining an income from it. And then you can be a bit more tactical, which is the trading of the asset going in and out, flips basically. And the combination of the two over a period of time, your total return, the growth in equity and the assets you hold, and then the quick cash profit that you get from flipping, that's really my view. That's how you're going to, make the wealth that we're all kind of trying to attain and pass on to the next generation.
No, for sure. It's been amazing having you on. And I think particularly just for those that maybe regardless of what the role is, for those that are working a 9 to 5, I think you're just a testament to show that if you have the conviction, it's possible to invest in property, run a property business, have a side business alongside having a super successful career. And you don't have to pick one or the other.
No.
You can do both. You don't have to be determined by what the gurus and everybody's saying online. You can determine your own destiny, exactly what you want to do. So massive shout out to you. I know you're going to go strength to strength. We've obviously now had you on the PBK podcast.
Yes.
Next step is to get you on obviously our development channel when we do our site visits
100%.
at Future Project. If people want to connect with you, if they want to get in touch, want to see some of the work you've been doing, how can people reach out?
Just reach out to me on my @ is at Point Guard Property. DM me, numbers on there as well. Reach out. I'm more than happy to have conversations and see what we can do for 2025 and beyond.
Amazing. Well, we appreciate having you on. That has been another episode of the PBK podcast. If you're interested in coming on, if you've got any guests that you want to recommend, let us know in the comments section. And like always, if you haven't, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like this video, and we'll be back next week with another special guest and another amazing episode. Peace.